creating a culture of love. We hate being uncomfortable. We want the easy route. We want the easy pill.
I could cry telling the story, but it's like...
I'm a retired CrossFitter.
This whole AI thing, we're going to be all right, because as long as we got to walk around in these, meat suits, I might still be in business.
No, and that's a beautiful way of saying it.
Cheetah isn't like, I wonder what the other cheetahs think of me.
If you're complaining about something, okay, well, what's your solution to change that? What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. That was completely brand new, by the way. Just
good.
For you.
That was energy. I like that.
Yeah.
I appreciate being in person with you. A strong in-person conversation. It's good.
You ready to dive in?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So I got Logan Gelbrich in the house. He is the founder of DEUCE, baseball player, author, philosopher, public speaker. Like, what don't you do?
I don't know. I think I just make it up, so I get a little latitude on what my job description is, So
that's the best way to live life.
It's all made up.
Yeah.
And the points don't matter.
No, I'm only if you're keeping score.
That's right, baby. That's right.
Who are you going to compare to anybody else?
Yeah, I was competing. I'm done with all that. Yeah.
I'm a retired CrossFitter.
You are.
Yeah.
I know all about that. Those are the glory days.
Very much the glory days.
The golden era. Yeah.
Yeah, we got some photos of us on some rings doing muscle ups.
Across the competition floor. Is that what you call that?
Yeah. You might say that. Over at Drake Stadium.
That's right, dude.
These are things people won't ever realize. Where did CrossFit come from?
Yeah, those pretty core days. This is a special time. Mm-hmm. And it feels cool to still like be in each other's lives, like seeing evolution. Right? I think that's maybe the point of all this. I don't have anything figured out, but it seems like evolution's part of it.
Momentum, forward progress, but we're still athletes. That's never going to go away.
Yeah. I think from a coaching perspective, what you just said is often really personified in how people literally move. It's like, you can see someone move about anything really, and you're like, what did you used to do? And it's like a very clear thing. And so, I definitely don't participate in sport the way I used to, but I think it's very present to me on a daily basis. It's like, it's not something you can axe off of your story.
No. And as physical beings, like we're very physical men, it's always going to be part of our life,
Yeah, I'm holding out that this whole AI thing, we're going to be all right, because as long as we got to walk around in these meat suits, I might still be in business.
Right?
Fingers crossed.
AI is going to start programming. Have you played with ChatGPT?
I haven't gone deep on it, but it's doing insane stuff.
See if it could program your next 8-week cycle.
Okay, yeah, respect. Yeah, I could use some of that. Yeah, as long as we still have to walk around on 2 feet, I think we might be all right in our field.
Yeah. So here we are. You have a saying at DEUCE.
Yeah.
It is hold the standard.
Yeah.
And I love that saying. I got different sayings in my life that I operate with, like earn the day, live through love, choose love. So how do you define holding the standard?
Thanks for asking that, because I think that it is sometimes the stereotype of that statement can be reduced to a misunderstanding. What we're not saying is we are the standard, we are the best. That's not what it is. It's a model that can be layered over many classic models that we know about. Even maybe I'll bring it back around at the end to even how creativity can work. So the way that it works is we observe that the standard in our language is sort of like a synonym for idealism. It's the best version of ourselves, a pinnacle state, perfection, whatever synonym you want to put in there. And what I know to be true about me and you and everyone I've ever met is that we are operating at some place beneath there. Everyone, every legend, every goat is still trying to traverse this gap between where they're at and where they're trying to go. And then, if and when you reach some sort of peak state, we know what happens, that the horizon moves further still, right? And so this concept around hold the standard is a call for leadership, which we can get into this as well, but we're saying that people who are embodying leadership are saying that I will be responsible for holding the space between where I am and where I could be. And it puts everybody in this like perfect tension of responsibility. So to hold the standard then isn't like this act of perfection or this declaration that we or anybody's better than someone else. It's more of like, actually, we're going to acknowledge how imperfect we actually are living and take some responsibility for that. And so to hold the standard is sort of like a relative burden that we think is important for us all to bear.
No, and that's a beautiful way of saying it. And let's just use CrossFit as an example of this. It is a physical gym, but just to put something to it, holding the standard could be me holding myself to the highest standard I have in this workout. Am I going low enough on my squats? Am I doing all the reps? Is my pull-up chest to bar actually chest to bar? But that's me competing with me. It's not the standard you at DEUCE set for us. You set us a model. Here's an example of proper, but where's your standard along the line? Because sometimes as a competitive athlete, like I get angry at people like, yo, you didn't do all the reps. That's not a burpee or like, and in my heart, it's not because I think they're cheating or it's more like you're cheating yourself.
It's less about us versus, you're observing that 100%. I think the beauty in that and the beauty in what you're saying is this element of relativity. You know, I think that we're looking for, whether it's made explicit or not, we all need and are looking for connectivity, connection with other people. And this is an interesting paradox that I've been thinking about, which is that a lot of times, especially in this town, man, like a lot of us are trying to unsuccessfully connect on, you know, what makes us great and what, you know, I'm like, connect to me because of some great thing that I did. And we're all doing this weird posturing thing when in reality, we almost never have that in common. But the one thing we do have in common is that relative burden that like, you know, I don't even need to ask you to probably guess with good accuracy that there's some dissatisfaction is the word that I would use, where you're still hungry to like push to the next level. And I feel that, and I just haven't met anyone who doesn't feel that. So if we can, it's a slightly more vulnerable take on it, but like that is the thing that we all are connected on, right? And I think that it removes things of like hierarchy and power dynamics. It just neutralizes the field. And the gym example is classic, right? Because heavy is heavy and hard is hard, and that brings us together if we let it, you know. And so that model, just to circle back to that model of hold the standard, is you know, it's nothing new. This is like very classic models about how development works, and the Stoics kind of, you know, layer on a model like this, and to your field, creativity, you know, the way that I'm not an artist, but parts of my job have to be creative. And when I try to talk about creativity, I just ram my square peg into the round hole of the standard then is your taste, right? Like when you're creating something, the moment you set out to create a painting or a sculpture or anything, I would imagine, without having asked you yet, that you have this mental representation, this like image in your head, like this is what it is. And then you go out and the paint hits the canvas, and then you just start to notice all the deviations from what you're trying to attempt in your head. And now you have to reconcile that gap, right? And that's like the iterative process of creativity, you know? And so we're all living in this model. I think if we can see it and acknowledge it, and I just think it's helpful.
No, I agree. And also we could say holding the standard, setting a standard. Well, if we use creativity, setting your constraints, which we could do that in fitness, we could do that in everything. So my constraints are like very clear now. There's certain colors I use, there's certain shapes I use. There's a word I use very often, right? Love. That's right. Things that spawn into that. So now it's like I've constrained myself into this simplicity. So that's my standard now, but I am elevating my goals of where I want to go to. So that's a standard of what I want to achieve. And how do we move that all forward? Right? How many things can I put this on now?
Constraints are really interesting. And it's really cool that you've acknowledged how powerful they are for you. I think sometimes we, from a distance, can view constraints as like their definition would lend to describe, that they're like limiting. Just a tangent story that I was a part of a workshop one time. This is going to sound pretty hippy dippy, but I was a part of a workshop one time where we did these exercises. It was more like a dance, like movements. Very ancient movements.
Tribal dancing?
Yeah, that's right. No, it was just a moment in time, you know, I wasn't in the circus, you know. But there was an observation made by the proctor or the teacher of the thing. So you can imagine, just for simplicity, a bunch of people in a room moving through these movements in lines, very formulaic to a beat, but not like free flow dancing kind of thing. And the intention behind the dances is that in order to be compliant to them, to be on time with the complexity, is like you have to be in the moment and you have to really focus.
To be present.
Yeah, and like here's what the observation was. After we were done, the teacher said, "Did you notice after you got into this sort of formulaic trance-like state, when you really owned the choreography, so to speak, that you could kind of express yourself in the constraints?" And we all sort of agreed, like, oh, there was a moment where I was like, I have this enough to where I can, like, it's subtle because we're all doing the same movements, but you can express freedom, creativity, etc.
An extra shimmy in there.
Yeah, a little something, right? And he flipped it on us and he goes, do you ever notice when someone says, show us a dance, just make something up, freestyle? What do people do? And I didn't even really know what the answer was. I just kind of like, what do people do? And he was like, they're bringing out, you know, the Dirty Bird. They're bringing out, it's nothing original. They like revert to copying something else that was presented to them. So in a weird way, that the constraints of this very formulaic thing allowed for individual expression. When if I just say, hey, come up here, do a dance, and you're doing the, you know, the windshield wiper, or the, you know, some contrived dance where it's not original at all, you know? And so constraints, in a paradoxical way, I think, allow for freedom and creativity. You know, any game works that way. That's right. It's like, how many outs an inning? Where do you put the lines on the field?
Exactly.
You know, what means strike? What means ball? And then you can play inside the thing. So that's kind of a power that you're recognizing, these constraints.
Yeah, and the constraints are definitely, they can seem limiting, but we're not talking limiting beliefs, which is a whole nother set of constraints. But those are things we may create upon ourselves and limit our own thought process. So in that example, you know, someone might be have to step. They didn't realize, oh, I could step and sway, step and sway.
Yeah, totally.
So all you had to do was the one thing. You can add a little flavor, though.
Totally. And there's like a lot to that, right? Like, you know, you can layer on all these coaching ideas about like mastering the basics, and like knowing the rules is how you lead yourself to break the rules. And, you know, like Picasso is this like abstract painter who went through traditional training to then break the rules, right? It's like we have to go through and participate inside the lines to, you know, like all, it's just, it's really, it's cool to break these kind of like assumptions, I guess, that we have.
Challenge them, break them, like remold them.
Yeah, so I think creativity is this like model that just layers nicely over, you know, this gap. You know, there's gaps everywhere. How do you reconcile that? And I think it's hard. I don't want to overuse a basic word like that, like hard, and celebrate difficulty or whatever, glamorize it too much. But it is hard to sit in the discomfort of what I just said. You know, I think that sometimes when I articulate let's say the hold to standard model, people are quick to defend their feelings about it, right? Which is like, well, can't we just be happy with what I'm like, yeah. And like, I think if you're trying to accomplish something excellent, move forward from a place of where you are to someplace new. It's less of like, you know, pretending where you're not like grateful for the moment or whatever. It's more about like, what I usually say is, can you change your relationship with dissatisfaction? Right? Like, if your relationship with dissatisfaction is, I don't know if tolerance is the right word, but if you can tolerate or accept a certain level of dissatisfaction and perceive it as fuel to move forward, then that's a healthy relationship, I think, you know. But you could very easily look at that hold the standard model that I just rolled out, and based on your programming or your worldview, you could just be like, well, I'm just never good enough, you know. And it's like, that's not what we're talking about, you know. Like, can we change this relationship? Like, if every time you set out to do a painting, and if the moment you put, you know, paint to canvas, you weren't thrilled with what was happening, you wouldn't be here. You know, like you wouldn't have a chance to build a body of work. You know? So it takes courage, I think.
Courage, 100%. Courage, vulnerability. Yeah. But it's true. You said something really clear that I actually liked. Using the word relationship. What is your relationship with being uncomfortable? What is your relationship with being satisfied or dissatisfied? I think, you know, the through line, or let's call it the evil energy, it's like being complacent, throwing in the hat for whatever reason. Why do we tend to throw in the hat so quickly or be complacent and then judge something like hold a standard, earn the day, live through love, and say, well, that's not me, that's you. I'm here. Yeah.
I think that there's, you know, this natural human propensity, right? Like, we're complicated creatures. You know, on one hand, we wouldn't, for better or worse, rule the globe as these small, you know, we're not very dangerous. You know, we don't have big fangs. Like, we wouldn't rule the world if we didn't have the courage to venture beyond that which is safe. You know, like the quote is like, we never would have left the cave, right? However, hardwired in us is this need for safety and survival. We also wouldn't be here if we were just wilding out all the time, right? And so I think that life, which I haven't figured out fully, of course, but I think that the sort of meaning of life is to observe a horizon you can see, like as like a North Star for improvement, and then move the needle towards it, and then see a new horizon. And that is sort of, from a biological sense, evolution. And that too is hardwired in us. And it's kind of like, not to reduce this to like fables and stuff, but it's like those two wolves are in us, you know, and it's kind of like which one you feed. And one of the beauties of the observations in writing the book actually was that I can acknowledge, and the reason why I wrote the book was an observation of a large set of the population living in the way that you just said, sort of complacent, resigned, relinquishing agency, checked out, playing follow the leader, whatever you want to say, playing it safe. And there's a lot of people locked arms on that. And, you know, we are communal creatures. So if I feel afraid about the vulnerability of advancing myself or pushing myself or whatever, it helps me feel safe to enroll you in that and them in that and everybody that I can around me to justify that, right?
We're commiserate.
Right,
we love to
can't blame me, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so that is such a prevalent pull. And I think that we need to recognize, like, what are the pulls that we have in our life? You know, is it alcohol? Is it like, what's a thing that's like kind of always calling your name? And a thing that is calling, I think, every human's name is like, hey, like, take it easy, chill, you know? But the good news, not all bad news. Like, the good news is I've observed that there is a population and like a community locking arms on the other end. I think it's smaller, less people, but those people align, you know. And you know, not to like do like a name droppy podcast thing, but it's like, you know, I've been in certain rooms where I was the one who I'm like, should I, like, how'd I get here? Should I, you know what I mean? Like everybody's like the guy, the gal, the whatever. And I was like, why do these people spend time with each other? And like a younger version of myself would have just said, oh, that's what like famous people do or successful people do. It's like they hang out with other people like them because that's just what they do.
Yeah.
And in these certain contexts, when this light bulb moment hit me, it was like, that's not what this is. That's like you are a music mogul who looks across the room and respects the hustle of the point guard for similar but different reasons.
Yeah.
And it's this like, and then, you know, vice versa, across disciplines where it's like, I acknowledge the courage and vulnerability of you, what we would say is holding the standard, noticing this like gap.
Yeah.
And luckily, there is a community there if you can find that, you know, because I think one of the deterrents of seeking your best self is it's a lonely road, you know?
Yeah, very much so.
So that's the good news, I think. You know?
No, and congregating around people playing a game either at your level or seeking people playing at a higher level that you want to strive to be.
Yeah.
As humans, we hate being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We want to be as comfortable as you. We want the easy route. We want the easy pill.
Totally.
Like that's why there's such a huge industry in supplements and fat burners and this and that. Like what's the easy way out instead of trying to do the work, hold the standard? What's in the gap and finding that question?
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to validate all our shortcomings and hang out with people doing the same thing. And all of a sudden you're in that circle and you're like, wait a minute, why are we all here in this space?
Totally.
You know, and I've outgrown friends because like they're happy where they're at.
Yeah.
This isn't a judgment. Like you got married way young.
Yeah.
You had kids way young.
Yeah.
You seem to be happy anyway. I don't want to assume if they are or aren't.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
But then you see some people that are just all weekend just drinking and buried in sports because they don't want to be home and they're not happy and they're not happy with the trajectory. So I think it's asking these questions with like,
Totally.
am I happy?
Yeah.
Am I playing at the best level I could play at? Can I play harder? Can I get better? And seeking this. So that's the purpose of having these conversations, right?
Yeah. There's a human condition that I think is like at the core of what makes life tricky for us in a lot of ways. You know, I don't think we fully understand the consciousness of all beings, but let's just say like an archaic, oversimplified view is like humans are self-aware and maybe like a cheetah isn't. Like a cheetah isn't like, oh, like I wonder what the other cheetahs think of me. It's sort of like it's sort of like hungry, kill, sleep, whatever. Yeah. And maybe we're wrong about that, but let's just use that archaic thing. Humans though are self-aware. Like we know we are an ego, a thing, a person. And then that like allows us to, in good ways and bad ways, depart from the moment, right? Like we can think about old shit, you know what I mean? Like we could be like miserable or happy thinking about something that happened 5 years ago. I don't think cheetahs are really doing that. I could be wrong, right? Same thing. You know, right now I could be drifting with my conversation from you and worried about a thing that's happening 3 days from now. And that's a human thing that we do. Now, the challenge though is we can't see ourselves. Like our self-awareness, all people's self-awareness, even the people in your life that are like, that dude's a pretty self-aware cat, you know, even that dude or gal cannot see themselves perfectly. Yeah. So we need these experiences and people around us to introduce us to ourselves, you know, like, because all the things that we're talking about that you probably talk about on every episode of this podcast, like personal development, growth, like, you know, achievement, all these like positive things are only as we're only as good at that pursuit as we are self-aware, right? Like if I don't know where I'm weak, then how can I work on those things, you know?
No, exactly.
And so,
but who's asking that question? That's the thing.
For sure. And I think it's a curated thing, like sort of like what you've been saying, you know? So if I can't see myself, then I need to be careful about what the mirrors are around me. So my view is that it almost doesn't matter the specificity, like the specifics don't matter. You know, like being removed from baseball, for example, when I was subject to it in baseball, playing it, I sort of just, baseball for baseball's sake, you know? But now that I have distance from it, it's like, oh, thank God I had this vehicle, this context to try something hard, fail a bunch, get a bunch of feedback, learn about myself, etc. Art can be that for you. Relationships can be that for us. And the people around us can be that for us. But as you get older, I think, and this, I'm sure we could dovetail some of the organizational aspects of DEUCE in here, which is, can you create a container, like an environment that would introduce you to that kind of feedback, right? Can I curate it where it's like, you're in my life, not just to like have beers and hang out. You're actually in my life to show me what's up, and like where I'm at, and we can make a deal. Like, I will do that for you. And now you sort of
get permission and ask for permission.
Yeah. Like curate a mechanism to receive the kind of feedback you need to learn yourself. And that's like the beauty, the gift and the curse of being human. It's like, we're self-aware. We have a very biased, incomplete view of reality, and we're susceptible to the information we take in, and I think a lot of people consciously and subconsciously surround themselves with people that support their bullshit.
Exactly. Without realizing it though, right?
Yeah, a lot of times.
Part of that self-awareness is now it's all like, oh, he's more self-aware. We're all aware. Yeah. But what are we actually aware of? What are we lying to ourselves with? And who are we getting the feedback from? Are you just telling me I'm handsome all day? Okay, awesome, cool. Or are you telling me, Ruben, you're showing up defensive, closed off, and invulnerable? Yeah. That's real feedback. Oh, really? How am I showing up that way? Well, I could give you an example. The other day, yada, yada, yada. That's a different kind of self-awareness now.
Super valuable, yeah.
Yeah, so, invaluable. And then I think the other thing with feedback is also acknowledging the feedback someone gives you and thanking them. Because if you don't acknowledge it, receive it, and thank someone for it, maybe they'll stop giving it to you. Because like, oh, they're not listening to me anyway.
Totally. And that's like creating the container, right? One of the biggest challenges around feedback is if we just look at, it's almost like gravity, it's like par for the course is it's just easier for me to tell you cool shit, positive shit. You look dope, bro. This is sick. This is awesome. Congrats. Yeah. Tight. Awesome. Cool. Much harder to be like, Ruben, you got a minute? Sit down, do the awkward thing. Yeah. Yo, you said this thing, it didn't feel good, whatever. So,
which we've had a convo like that before.
We have, yeah, we have, and I appreciate when you do that for me, and vice versa. And I think that the more that you create a container for that, the more it will show up. And in your example, if you don't support an environment for it, it's just not coming. And so a lot of the teaching that I do looks to, I think we can learn a lot from extremes. So extreme sport example. It's like if you look at the communication in any of the major professional sports, it's very direct, it's very helpful, and because the meaning associated with the outcome, like the perceived consequences are so high for failure, that it's like we can kind of get over our little side whatever bullshit, worry about what you think of me and vice versa, because we got to put points on the board and we got to do it right now. Yeah. And we're playing against people who can get over that real quick. Exactly. Right? But then you get into like adulthood and we start to perform in these very low performance ways where we're sort of like passive aggressive. I start politicking. I won't tell you stuff to your face, but I'll tell 6 other people about it. Like this is a very adult low performance thing that would never happen in a Super Bowl. It would never happen in a World Series locker room. It would never happen in these high performance organizations. You look at the military, it's like when you start performing low and people die, you see best practices show up like magically, right? And so all that to say is, yeah, we don't need to live in those extreme environments, but we can learn from them. And okay, if that is helpful to this feedback loop, like how do I do a man-made version of that here in like this little company or this thing and this family, And when we build that out, you can do a thing which is like our personal goal, which is to like build organizations that by their own design get better over time. And the only way that can happen is if we're able to exchange the best information for growth, which is hard. So we need to celebrate that. We need to pave the way for that. And if someone gives you feedback and you shrug them off, don't take it, don't appreciate it, like you said, then you're building a thing that can't get better by its own nature.
I mean, it's basically cancer mutating and
100%.
growing.
And it's a trade-off. Like, I'll choose to feel good right now to make it impossible for me to get better. And people make that choice
All day long.
And that's, eesh,
Yeah.
it makes me want to cry.
No, and
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah.
But and here's another thing, right? You're like, I'm building organizations. I am building coaches and mentoring them. And there's a fear as a leader, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. Wow, I'm building them to take me out and become the competition.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't want to give them this knowledge because then they'll be better than me. So like, how do you deal with that? Because there's a lot of people that operate that way. Like, well, I'm not going to give you my best practices. I'll give you pretty close to them because you work for me and I want you to be as best as you can for me, but I don't want you to go over me.
Yeah. I think that's a fear thing. And I think that like dovetails into the main theme of what you're doing and this podcast and everything. It's like, when you operate from a place of fear and worry, there's a cascade of problems that come with that.
Yeah.
What you perceive that you're doing is protecting yourself. Like, oh, like no one's gonna compete with my thing. It's like, first of all, the market will dictate what's up.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But that being said, I think that anybody who has lived in an opposite place of like giving and a worldview of abundance has benefited handsomely from that.
Yeah.
And I think that the mental gymnastics that you have to do to justify restrictive, like fear-based behavior is like pretty strong, right? It's just, there's not a lot of growth and opportunity there. You know, I just haven't seen returns on treating people that way. And maybe I take it like a step further, which is like a little bit less philosophical, which is a lot of the things that I do, whether they're like smart or not, is like, I just want to live in a world where that's true. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I don't really know, like, what's the strategy on this? Like, should I, here's a silly one. 6 friends go out to have dinner. We've all been there, right? Bill comes out. Yo, let's like split it a million ways. It's like, I don't even know if this is a great financial decision, but I just don't want to live in a world where we're doing all that. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to trust that, like, yo, we'll get next time you get it and whatever.
Yeah.
And so there's an intangible, maybe non-strategic action there where it's like, maybe we just behave like the way we want the world to be, you know?
Well, be the example, right?
Yeah.
How do you want to see the world? Show up that way.
Yeah.
I want to see the world as a more loving place. I got to do it every day as best as I can. I'm going to have bad days. I'm going to have good days, but keep going forward. But that's a leadership quality. That's leader mentality. Not a lot of us think that way.
Yeah.
So like, and that's also a creator mentality. Like, I am going to create the world I want to create. And this is how I want to see it lived. So I need to show up that way as a leader and take responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is, taking responsibility. You know, I read a quote the other day that was, the leader is the person who blames no one. You know, it's like, so if you're unhappy about something, then, you know, let's just say the characteristics of a leader or the essence of a leader is that person would just then do something about it. You know, one of the things culturally that we have in the organizations that I'm involved with is around complaint. You know, so what's a complaint? A complaint is basically an observation that you don't like the way that something is the way that it is. All right. So if you want to offer a complaint, either you should offer the other side of it right away. But if you don't, what the person across the table from you will then say is, well, what are you committed to?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't like how we're doing this, that, and the other thing. It's like, great. And so what's your commitment to do something about that? Because if it's nothing, then like, thanks for saying words. I don't know, you know? And so I think that, you know, when we start to sort of decentralize the definition of leadership, the goal for me on that is that we're all living in leadership.
We are.
Know? And so there is no moment where you can kind of just throw your hands up and just be passive about that. And on the leadership conversation, it's like, leadership is irrelevant when things are great. Like, does anyone need leadership? Like, a team doesn't even need leadership when you're undefeated.
Exactly.
Like, you need leadership when it's like, oh shoot, we're not doing what we said we were going to do.
You're 0-11.
Someone needs to raise their hand and be like, yeah, that's actually on me.
Yeah.
So as long as there's problems, we need someone to step up.
No, totally. I'm going to step back a few seconds to that one example about complaints you gave.
Yeah.
So an example I give, which is one of the reasons we started the nonprofit, Beautify Earth, because as people, we tend to, and these were examples I actually saw on you, people, like, there's graffiti on the wall. They write letters, call the council, call the city office, call the cops. They call everyone.
Yeah.
The amount of energy that went into all that complaining, you could have gone to Home Depot, bought a gallon of paint for $20, covered it up yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point, is like, when we start choosing to be the leader in our life and take responsibility, you can actually change the world.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I don't like that. Let me go change it. So I like how you said, well, what are you committed to?
Yeah.
If you're complaining about something, okay, well, what's your solution to change that?
Totally. There's like lower parts of me that can, start to get like riled up on complainers and how they show up in the world or whatever. And so I don't like to generalize, but I'll just say I've observed often that complainers are usually bored people. They're people that aren't contributing a lot in the world. I've never seen someone getting after it, absolutely getting after it, be that person, neighbor, weird person who's like calling numbers and like that they're just at odds with each other. And so I think that if we are just making moves in the world to like do good and create, then all that goes away. But that's my soapbox on that.
No, I agree. And that's the truth. Like, sometimes I have these conversations. I'm like, I just don't have time to do X, Y, and Z. Whatever rabbit hole I end up with talking
100%.
to someone, like, I just don't have time.
Yeah.
With everything that I'm doing, I do not have to, and I'm not trying to use the busy excuse or I'm just up to my things, and I have this mission in life. My buddy Lewis says, create a meaningful mission. And if everyone has a meaningful mission, I think then your sole focus is what are you doing instead of what is everyone else doing?
Yeah, it's like, I'm taking a bit of a leap, but this is what comes to mind when you say that is, you ever get in these arguments? It's like, not an argument, but like a debate around like nature versus nurture. You're like, come on, man. Like, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble right now, but like LeBron, like that dude was like born to be, and it's like, okay, yes, there's like a lot of attributes there, or LeBron is sort of teed up to have success in the NBA, right? But if there's even 1% of variability in like how much nurture needs to be done there, then I think it negates the argument. Like, anybody who has stood tall on this argument of like fixed traits, we're born this way, whatever, relinquishing responsibility in those ways, none of those people have maxed out their potential to state that argument, right? And so I've never met a person, but until someone fully maximizes like their standard or their potential, then we can have that conversation. And since that's never true, it just seems like we should all just be busy, head down, getting after it.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's like, use the example of once the 4-minute mile was broken, how many people did it? But until it was broken, it was that human potential, that possibility didn't even exist. And all of a sudden, like, people that you would never think can just go smash it.
Yeah, totally. It's like, even if it's true that, who you can be in the world was decided before you were born, even if that's true, it doesn't pay to believe it's true. Like, they're taking on that worldview and moving through your life that way would garner no upside. So even if you're wrong about the fact that you can create your destiny and be who you want to be and all that, even if you're wrong about that, you would still get the net outcome of this other argument, this nature argument, And so I think that like that always comes to mind around any sort of like victim-based decision making, you know, blame or externalizing a situation. It's like, even if half a percentage is a variable in your control, like cross that gap and then let's have a conversation.
No,
and
I agree.
I say that from a place of that conversation is never coming, because no one will ever reach that space where you're perfect all of a sudden.
But I mean, imperfectly perfect and perfectly imperfect. If we live in that balance, like, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, it's also what day we wake up, and like tomorrow I could wake up and be depressed and sad and not happy and not loving. I have to choose it. Like, let me just choose it a little more today, because I need it more today than I needed it yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a never ending thing, you know. But as long as you're in the game, you gotta play. You gotta show up and play. You know, we have this phrase around the gym, kind of like work culture, which is like, observer is not a role. It's like, there's just not, we don't have a role for that. Like, you gotta stick your neck out there. There isn't a thing. I personally don't have enough money to pay anyone to just hang out. You know what I mean? So So it's like, there's no spot on the team for hanging out. You know? Well,
yeah, it's like, that just makes me think, like, you know, are you a spectator in the game of your life, right?
Yeah.
Your life is your championship game. Do you want to be a champion at your life? Like, you're in charge of your Super Bowl, your World Series, whatever it is that your Formula One race season. Like, you're in charge of that. Now, are you spectating?
Yeah, there's a lot of I mean, I'm sure people can fact check, but like science behind that as well, which is ultimately around agency, is like a word that describes what you're saying, which
define
is like,
agency.
So agency is it's a state or essence of control. If you have agency, you have the ability to affect change. To remove someone's agency would then make them a prisoner to their plight, their situation. Right. And so if you have a high level of agency, you can make moves, you can improve your state, you can go left, go right, go up, go down, whatever. And, you know, what we sort of know from a science perspective, like on a brain perspective, is you can't be happy and be a victim at the same time. Like, you can't perceive that you have no control over your state and be happy at the same time. And then going back to extremes, like, this is a bit much, but we can learn that from extremes. So prisoners of war, I can't think of much worse scenarios, right? So people who are held in a war scenario by an enemy, being tortured, mistreated, etc., confined, you know, no articles of clothes, no valuables, you don't have a name anymore, all these things. What do those people over history repeatedly do without coaching? Oftentimes those people take action that looks like claiming agency, even when it feels backwards. So that's what hunger strikes look like. You know, being like a young person reading about history. Okay, so you're a prisoner of war. You're basically being killed slowly. Yeah. How do you then, why do you make a choice where you're like, nah, no lunch for me? I'm like, what? That's all you got? You better, you know.
I know, right?
And what that is a either conscious or subconscious effort to have agency over this thing. I don't have anything else, but I'll tell you, no, I'm not needing it. And
keep the power you can actually have in the moment.
And that's crazy powerful, right? It's like, I can deal with some hunger, right? You don't have full power over me because I won't eat that. And like, if that occurs in those environments, then what does that mean in just more pedestrian versions of life, you know? And if you feel that you have agency, you can then reverberate and enjoy the feelings that we all know and appreciate. Some of that's like tactical, I think, like, what do we do on a Tuesday? And like, how do I design my life? And all these like kind of very like tactical, you know, podcast worthy things almost, you know?
Yeah.
But then there's like the worldviews that live above that, which is like, well, how do you perceive the world? You know, do you perceive that you're just the way, who you are, and things are the way they are and they have to be that way, and that's you giving up your agency? You know, you can't work with us if you don't at least learn about Carol Dweck's work, which is the growth versus fixed mindset, right? So she's Stanford researcher who's basically bifurcated, like made two distinct worldviews. One is a growth mindset, one is a fixed mindset. And then, I'm sure folks have heard of this already, but just to like revisit, it's like this fixed mindset on a foundational level just perceives that our traits are unchangeable truths about us, right? Like, if you had a fixed mindset, you would perceive like, well, I was just born athletic and I'm smart and I'm good at this and I'm a good communicator and I'm a good person. And that's just who I am. Yeah. And those aren't bad things to think, but it can be dangerous because if you receive feedback or inputs that like, maybe you lose a game, maybe someone tells you, yo bro, like you're not nice. Then
it's challenging your fixed perception. Yeah,
it's really bad news because I'm giving you information that you can't do anything with, right? You either have to bob and weave and make the person who's giving you this feedback wrong or bad or whatever, or face what you perceive to be the truth, which is that, oh shit, maybe I'm not a good athlete or whatever the characteristic is. Conversely, the growth mindset just perceives on a foundational level, and it's less about performance or any of that. It's just the assumption that we can change. I'm malleable. I can improve and degrade in any capacity. So then if someone comes to you and says, yo, that was like a garbage effort, or I didn't like this thing that you made, it's just good news because it's the way forward, Yeah. And that's like the 10,000 foot view of what we were just talking about with agency. What great opportunity for agency when you have the ability to change, that all of these inputs are just like helpful,
Totally. And the thing is, we have to be open to that, right? Because as we age, it's harder.
Yeah, you get entrenched.
To acknowledge, to accept. Like, try to change a 65-year-old's mind.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Right? And just let's look at our parents. Like,
totally.
We're all doing the best we can, but everyone's grown up in different eras. We operate differently. And there's so much more information in the world now. Yeah. So much more for us to realize, oh, it's not fixed.
Yeah.
Hey, and at 70, I can go become an athlete now.
100%.
Or start a business 100%. Or reinvent myself or whatever the case is. And we're living longer.
Yeah.
And hopefully healthier for the most part. But
that's interesting when you say that, like how we become calcified in these different ways. Because as you said that, what came to mind was, until life happens, like I get to teach some of these things to different folks all around. And whenever I go into a room, the question seems obvious. So just to like overshare it, it's sort of like, who here wants to be better, like further along, more evolved, more capable? And it's like everybody's hands go up, like everybody in this room's hands would go up. And then I'm like, okay, so what specifically would get that outcome? Because what you're saying is you want to be different. Okay, so if I stood up here and just regurgitated back to you what you believe to be true, would you be the same or different? And I was like, well, it would be the same. Like nothing would happen. So then it's like, well, what needs to be present for change to happen? And even like from a biological perspective, we need these sort of negative, disconfirming inputs that drive us, right? Like if I told you something that blew your mind, like you just like came to today and like being like, this is the way the world is, and I told you something that was like irrefutable, you were just like, what? Like you would be different. Like you would hold space for more. And so all that to say, that's like the slow way to describe that. If that's true, then we need to be on the hunt for environments and experiences and the information that would elicit this change. And I say all that because everything I just said can be done on purpose. I think that whether it's conscious or subconscious, the way that you're moving in the world and doing this podcast and the work that you're doing is introducing you to growth, like on purpose. Now, if you don't do that, so let's say you're resigned, like one of the the people we were talking about before who have like kind of given up, so to speak. Those people grow as well sometimes when life grows them for them. You get cancer, financial nightmare, someone gets killed, something tragic has to change you, you know? And so it's like, going back to agency, do you want to grow when something horrible happens in life? Because life will do that. Or do you want to like take the torch and sort of like grow on purpose? And now you can like move through life in a way that isn't reacting to, you know, this tough lesson you're going to learn in 10 years because your life's going to get set on fire. You know?
No, that's a great example. I love that. Are you going to grow on purpose?
Yeah.
And we can go down the rabbit hole of there's 1,000,001 self-help books, podcasts, videos, conferences. They go to your conference, right? Everyone has these things. And we go there with the intention of, oh, I'm going to go here and I'm going to grow. But if you don't start doing it differently or actually applying it, that's one thing. My biggest thing is you go to some of these things, you get all hoorah, energized. You're like, yeah, you took your notes, you get back to the office or whatever, you get back to life, you shove those notes in a drawer, 2 weeks go by, the fuzzies go away, you're no longer motivated and amped up, and you're back in the cycle. So it's like, do you want life to happen to you or for you? Either way, something's happening. Or if you don't make the choice, someone's making it forward. Do you want to take control of that? Like, a lot of this is just, are we leaders in our life? So do you want to grow on purpose?
Yeah, it's hard. And I think that, you know, it's like going back to that gravity example. It's like, if you just sort of acknowledge that that'll always be tougher than the alternative, then like, we got to set ourselves up for success, you know, like, like at baseline, we're probably going to shy away from growth because it's difficult. So I think people that have a lot of success in growth and transcending themselves are putting themselves on purpose in situations that would kind of like not do it for them, but introduce them to that which is required for growth.
No,
you know?
totally.
So
this is great. So I want to go a little bit more personal. Let's dive into like mental health and depression a little bit. You know, I suffered from it at a point, but I question, I'm like, I can't be depressed. There's nothing wrong with me. Like, I'm fit. I'm healthy. I have a good career. I live in LA. I have no baggage. Like, this can't be what I'm going through. And it was really, I'm unhappy with my life. I'm happy with what I was doing. I didn't have purpose. You know, it's led me to do this kind of work. But it doesn't mean I still don't have my bad days and all that. But like, you talk about growth mindset and learning and adapting and philosophy. And that's why I really wanted to have this conversation. But I also know that you have really tough, dark, bad days. How do you navigate that with what you're learning? And do you think that that led you toward learning and seeking growth on purpose?
Yeah, there's a lot there. One thing that comes up is I too shared that feeling that you were describing of like, well, it seems like what this is stemming from are all things that I should just be extremely grateful for. So now I'm like doubly beating myself up. Like I'm feeling shut down and low and depressed in a way that's unrecognizable, and seemingly the source are things that people would love to have, you know? So one thing that emerged from that was a previous version of myself. So I've grown a little bit, and I'm still growing. But let's say a earlier version of myself didn't have the perception that strengths of mine could come with any shadow parts, right? So one thing that I love about myself is a willingness to commit to the work, so to speak. Like maybe a simplest way to say it is like a blue collar approach. You know, like I'm not that talented, and I don't perceive myself that way. I was able to like get pretty far in a baseball career, not really having a lot of God-given talents. I would say I wasn't really that good, but a maniacal, insane work ethic helped me overachieve. And then I sort of get out of that and I wonder, you know what? I don't know much, but I'm looking around, and if I applied any percentage of that towards anything else, it looks like I can beat some ass in life right now. That's what it feels like. And then I try that and I had success. And I'm like, I love this part of me. And what I didn't have awareness to is that in many cases you can look at a strength, and as tall as it is, it probably casts a shadow of equal size and proportion. And you can see the table is set for a lot of things, right? Like putting yourself second, like, you know, overdoing it, overcommitting, getting run down, all the things, right? But when you lean so heavily with low awareness to that, you can get pretty far down the road and then not realize where you are, who you are, and feel really depleted. And that's where I was. And so that's just something that, and it comes back to awareness. You know, I would identify as a pretty self-aware person, and my lack of self-awareness almost killed me, you know? And so that's the scary part.
That's a powerful statement, though. You're saying I am very self-aware, but my lack of self-awareness almost killed me.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what I mean is, I mean, there are people listening to our words right now. They're like, yeah, like, got it. I'm also and I'm like, no, you can't see yourself.
Exactly.
You can't, everyone has, many parts of us that are in our blind spots, you know? And so, and that's just the truth. Right. And so, with that came a lot of learning, and has come a lot of learning. And now I have like a lot more, you know, I still can struggle, but I feel largely out of the weeds of kind of where I was. And what's helpful is a lot of the learning around the nervous system and how that works, like how you can get to a state of apathy and shut down, and this sort of like dorsal state, you know, where the animal plays dead because it's no longer engaged. And so if you have language for that, I think you can make smarter moves and notice when to sort of intervene. But I didn't have any of that. All I had was go and try harder. And
I don't know, go 3, 2. It doesn't matter how sore I am. I'm in pain. I still have that 3, 2, 1, go. I go.
Yeah. And so it's just a more nuanced look at life, you know, and I think that I'm grateful for it. I remember being in that state, and as disorienting and bad as it felt, I do remember feeling grateful because I felt like I could relate to parts of the human experience that were just so foreign to me. Like, I'm a white male who grew up in Southern California in an upper middle class, like born in 1985. Like, I grew up on third base. I grew up halfway home. You know, like, this is a slam fucking dunk. And, you know, in those states where you're just really confused and not wanting to participate in the human experience, is like compassion. I understand why everybody does colossal amounts of drugs and self-harm and and is living lifestyles that I would have judged for nearly all of my life. Because of like the pain of the human experience is something that I was just like, and still, you know, we can look at my version of my low is like still pretty sweet. You know what I mean? And so it's like, there's a human empathy part there as well. But I remember being like, oh, okay, like I'm just being exposed to more of what is real, you know, like you start to realize even silly stuff, like there's a lot of good music written about these parts, you know, a lot of good art, a lot of good art, bro.
Books, you name, movies.
100%, you know, and I was living a very, you know, easy, polished, well-to-do version of life that wasn't that real, you know, so I got a little dose of the sadness side. But you know, I think that we're in not to just like divert too much, because I'm glad to talk about myself as much as you'd like in that thing. But one thing that's coming to mind right now is, from a collective standpoint, I think that in our lifetime we're gonna see radical shifts around acknowledgement of, it's an overused word, but trauma and pain and these things that have gone unspoken for a long time. That and I've been very fortunate on from a trauma perspective, like the most trauma-free life you can imagine. But this conversation that in part you're sort of leading is coming up through the grassroots in a way that I think our generation is willing to step in and prevent a sort of unconscious continuation of behaviors that's really ineffective.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly with that line.
It's like,
and it's up to us to start continuing that.
Yeah.
But the other thing, talking about trauma, I think we're so quick to judge. Like, you're saying, I have no excuse to be that way. I'm like, I had no excuse to be that way. But that doesn't mean we can't feel that way or we're wrong in feeling that way. And yes, I wasn't sexually abused. Does that mean I don't have trauma?
Yeah, fair.
It doesn't have to be rape or violence at any level. Or, we always think like it has to be extremes. If it's extremes, like, why are you letting that happen to you? Like, be harder, be tougher. But we also then create stories around our perceived trauma. Maybe to someone else it's not trauma, but for us it was very real. And when I was 7 and I was told like, shut up and sit in the corner, guess what? I shut up for the rest of my life and sit in the corner. Like, we created that. Like, was that traumatic? No. Did it make me be more invulnerable as I grew up? Yes. Yeah,
that's fair. And I think that a lot of us do that. I mean, folks who, there's no real point in judging the level of someone's human experience, but having dominion over that, like just going back to the awareness piece, I think that coming up through the grassroots is a willingness to, take ownership of the parts of us that have lived like in the shadows a lot, the suffering and all that. And I'm excited to see what that is, in a lot of ways. I think there's a bit of a renaissance of like the human experience in that way.
No, I agree. There's a creative renaissance. There's an artistic renaissance. There's a lot. I think it is stemming from our generation now moving forward. The future is the future. Now that I have a kid, has my work perspective or everything changed? No. What has changed is it's even more important.
Can't imagine.
Having offspring, having my child run around just like he's a stud little athlete already. I'm like, he's 2 kicking a soccer ball. I'm like, who taught him that?
I can't imagine.
He sleeps with his ball. Anyway, see that? I go into
it's
that.
Happening.
But like, that's why our work is more important. Like, our future offspring, their offspring, future friends' offspring, everyone's children. Like, if we can make the world a better place, we look at our parents' generations, their parents' generations, like there's the Great Depression mentality. Then there's like growing up in the 60s, 70s. There's everyone has certain things that we latched onto and crafted our narrative and our agency around, right? Like, or how we defined holding our standards. So it's like, how do we create the leader inside of us and don't think we need to be the president? We don't need to own a gym and have 200 plus members to be leaders.
No,
just
for
lead
sure.
yourself.
And it's like, it's very powerful recognizing from a parent perspective the importance of love in a very straightforward way, and how that is bestowed on folks, because I was objectively lucky. I think that the way that I think about my parents is just pure admiration and gratitude. I mean, I don't know what acing parenting is, but like, I feel like they aced parenting. And that's only been solidified more in my mind as I move into adulthood and you start interacting with people who are carrying their childhoods in such a forward-facing way. Like I tell folks from like a business consultancy perspective sometimes that you're managing childhoods, man. Like, there was 27 years where you weren't there. And you're in, coach, and I was fortunate enough to know knowing that I was loved no matter what. I could have been a trash man or a DJ or a, semi-professional ping pong player. I could have, worked at Whole Foods or whatever. And I was unequivocally loved by my parents. And that in some ways feels like a hall pass to do life in a way that I feel isn't present for a lot of people. And so that sort of begs the question, like, well, stepping into to the parental next generation environment, like, how do we make sure that we're leaving that unquestionable for people? Because it has consequences that are present Monday through Sunday. Yeah. And
no days off.
Man, I was our nonprofit visited a prison. We work with folks who are locked up and formerly locked up, and I was able to go into a prison a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and we did this exercise. It's kind of a common exercise in conventions, and it's like an empathy thing where you're standing across from someone and there's a line taped on the ground and they ask questions, and it's like, step to the line if, and they start out simple. You like country music, and then people step and you're like, oh damn, crazy, whatever. And then it gets heavy. And I could cry telling the story, but it's like all folks it was a business pitch competition. So folks who were out or on my side of the line, live in like quote unquote well-to-do lives or whatever. And then folks who are locked up, many of them for life, in a maximum security prison. Like the guy across from me has a 107-year sentence. He'll never see life.
Wow.
And
107 years.
Guys who had spent 15 and 20 years in solitary confinement, like heaviest stuff. And one of the questions was, I'm trying not to cry on your podcast, bro.
It's okay. That's why we're here.
Step to the line if you were tucked into bed by a parent, sorry, and they told you that they loved you every night. And
that's tearing me. I have a kid too, so.
And of course, like our line, stepping up.
Yeah.
And I think maybe one guy from their line stepped forward. Love's important,
That gives me chills. No,
yeah.
Hey, I put my little guy down every night, so like I can't imagine. My parents, they were always there. They tucked us in. For all the faults that I have and all the problems I have with my parents anyway, love was always present, and they were always there to give us the best opportunity. And we know people that haven't had that opportunity. Yeah. And I've been able to do some prison work. I got to do a mural in a prison with
I remember that.
max security. They all committed the worst crime, which would be killing the person.
Yeah.
So, and they believed they didn't have a choice. Like I can't imagine going through that conversation with them, but we did a lot of conversations and we landed on forgiveness. And I think what this stems down to, and we'll wrap it at this, and thank you for sharing that. Yeah. How can we ask for something when we don't give it to ourselves, right? We love to always ask for love, ask for forgiveness, ask for empathy and compassion and, patience, but we are not loving to ourselves. We don't forgive ourselves. We're not patient with ourselves. We don't have empathy for ourselves. We're not, and it goes back and forth. So it's like we're always trying to seek it from somewhere else when we should first seek it from ourselves. And ultimately, I think that's the ultimate act. If we are truly selfish creatures, human beings are selfish, but I think we always forget our self, because then we operate from that ego of what does the bravado look like?
Yeah.
What is someone going to think of me?
Yeah.
And then give
the
it to yourself.
projection of all that. Yeah.
Like I can't teach my son how to love himself. I can show him how I love myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're always watching.
He watches everything. Yeah. So like I get that. So no, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So last couple of questions.
Yep.
One is back to hold the standard again. Our standards are written early on by parents, employers, coaches, mentors, relationships we've had. Do you believe that is very easy to rewrite our own standard and create our own standard for ourselves.
Yeah, I think there's a process there. It is normal in a progression to something like self-actualization or just becoming our own self that goes through and beyond standards that are imposed by us. You know, so there's a guy who I really appreciate, whose work I reference a lot, called Robert Keegan, and he does a lot around like a work at Harvard about adult development. So it's a framework that we teach, and I won't go through the whole thing, but the long story short is, by the time we reach adulthood, most of our consciousness is socialized, meaning the limits of our beliefs are assigned to us externally.
Yeah.
So my church believes this, so that helps me understand like what's right and wrong. And then like, you know, I'm from California and like listen to these bands, and so that kind of informs like what kind of clothes I wear. And then I had these parents, and so if I were to tell you what I believe to be true, I would basically be quoting other people.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a place in a progression that hopefully we can include and transcend. Okay. And so it's not easy by any means, but I do think that there's a place beyond that where you start to aggregate, and people who have reached this level, it's less common, but there's lots of people who are here where they're like, yeah, I'm Christian, but like kind of none of that weird stuff. And then like, you know, I grew up in California, but like, I'll rock some Brooks Brothers or whatever, you know, like you're more nuanced than the external thing. I'm making a joke, right? And then you have this sort of personal charter, and that stage, you know, not coincidentally, is called the self-authoring stage. You know, it's where you start to like hold the pen and have like your own,
become the author of your life.
your own story. You know, that's not the end of the progression, but that is I think a worthy place to kind of get to. And the only way we can get there is by receiving these frame breaking bits of information, you know, where you break the game of your church and your geography and your political affiliation and all these things, and you're sort of like, you know what, like, yes but no, and now we kind of move to this place. And and I'll try to like wrap here, but like the coolest part about that shift of those two stages is the socialized stage, because everything is presented to me from somewhere else, is not a role of leadership. It's a follower type behavior, you know? So then it like, you know, I'm slanging my own dogma here. Like, it behooves us to step into personal responsibility and your own custom view. You tell me what's what, you know? Tell me who's Ruben, I'll tell you who's Logan. And, whether we're there yet or not, like, we're trying to become. What are we becoming?
Exactly. Yeah. No, be, do, have.
Yeah.
Gotta be it, then you do it, then you have
That's
it.
right. Yeah.
You know, but the other thing right there before the final question is, I also think there's a lot of fear around having our own opinions these days, because you don't know who you quote unquote may offend. Although you can't actually offend anyone, you could take offense to what someone said. So you're just not taking agency. You're giving up your power in that moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting time with that. I'm interested to see how it all shakes out, because the things that you can't say become dangerous.
Very much so.
And you know, if you don't want to look at like the current landscape, you can probably, everyone could look backwards in their lives and think about like, what were the questions you couldn't ask? You know, a lot of people couldn't ask questions about money. And you got a whole effed up relationship with money. Couldn't ask questions about whatever you can't speak about becomes a dark thing. And I think right now we're in jeopardy of creating a situation where you can't speak up, and that's dangerous. In
a lot of things, almost everything.
Yeah.
And that's taking away freedom. That's taking away, and even education. It's like, learn this, regurgitate here, now you pass.
Yeah.
It isn't like, here's a question, write us an essay.
No, for sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So Final question, favorite question. This is how we wrap.
Yeah.
Logan, how do you define living a life through love?
Oh man, I had a feeling you were going to ask me this. You know, I don't have this figured out. I think that love sort of transcends everything. And so I sort of, the way I want to answer this is aspirational, right? So living through love, if love is a pinnacle state, you know, I think there's a lot of theories that like the end of whatever this life looks like a singular experience of total love. You know, if that's the pinnacle. If God is love or a higher power is love, then living a life through love to me is one that is aspirational, where I need to transcend to a better version of myself. And that includes leveling up on all the areas that are pedestrian and human and flawed for me. And that's, you know, in the clouds answer, but I think tactical, 2 feet on the ground. It's one of abundance and acceptance and is inclusive and all of the positive upward spiraling versions of the human experience. I think a lot of humans have beliefs and systems that are downward spiral, right? Like think about the competitive version of seeing the world the way we were talking about earlier. It's like the only way that goes is down. Yeah. You know, if you have to lose for me to win, that is only a downward spiral conversation. So I think living a life through love is this one of aspiration towards better. The both and the win-win. Yeah, that's right. Yes, and Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You did mention the book. Yeah. You did write a book. What's the title of your book? Where can people get it? It's called Going Right. It's a logical justification for pursuing your dreams. And you can find that on Amazon. And it's also an audiobook. Great book. I got it. Read it a while ago. And where can everybody find you? I'm on the internet at Functional Coach, Twitter and Instagram. And it's probably strong enough. Yeah. Awesome. We'll link all that up anyway. Thanks for being here. You. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. Thanks for bringing your standard. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in to Live Through Love. If you love this episode, you'll love this episode.